What an amazing, amazing 2 days at Amazon Business this week here. I love all the energy in the room. I love all of the connections we made throughout the week. Great speakers, great moderators, great panelists across the board. So I hope you had a great time thus far, and we're looking forward to leading this panel with you today. Hey, and I also want to give a shout out to Chicago. Man, what some beautiful weather. I'm from Houston. And so when they told me to come to Chicago, I got my beanie cap, my gloves, an extra pair of socks just in case. But I tell you, so far it's been really good. And then the tough part about it, I can't believe that Alex and Esther put us before Magic Johnson.
No pressure.
Who does that? That's almost like worse than coming before lunch or after lunch. But one thing Magic doesn't know, I'm a die-hard Boston Celtics fan. I'm a Larry Legend, Cornbread Maxwell, Tiny Archibald, DJ. You go on and on. I'm just a deep fan of them, but I'm glad to be here today. And I know about Magic. We're going to run the clock out on him. We're going to take this thing to overtime. We're not giving him any assists. He's done for that. But I'm really glad to be here with you today. And hey, I'm Kennedy Ost, the Vice President of Global Procurement Organization. I manage a group of 3,000 employees. We have a spend of $50 billion globally, 12,000 suppliers, and we do a lot of business across 40 different countries around the world. So I'm pretty excited to be here. Hey, we're here today to talk about smart business buying and the role that CPOs play in helping their organizations grow and stay ahead of all the fast-changing conditions that take place. And many of you see those across the board. And now smart business buying means something different to everyone. So it all depends on what role you're in. It has something to do with how you play things out. So if you're in technology, making sure you drive innovation, grabbing the right products and services to really drive more efficiency across your business. So it really means something different for the technology leaders. If you're a sustainability leader, it's all about supporting the purchasing that we do across the organization to make sure we support all of the ESG goals that we might have and drive those right values. And not just supporting the purchasing, but making sure you're taking part and engaging with your procurement leader to drive the right results around the board. And for us procurement leaders, it's not all about getting the right price and getting the right supplier, but simplifying the process we have around purchasing, streamlining the compliance that we do, and we always got to save money and make sure we're saving time across the board. If you think about it from a C-suite perspective, it's about navigating risks, making sure we understand what takes place out there, what's been very disruptive to the market, and developing future strategies to make sure we focus clearly on what's going on. And so procurement leaders can really engage and help the business drive the right outcomes across the board. And so regardless of where you play, all these challenges and goals really got to be met head on, but it's definitely going to be very risky as we go forward on there. So in fact, Amazon Business Annual State of the Procurement Report found that procurement leaders across the board got a bigger and greater seat at the table. So often we were sitting in the back, didn't have a real role to play in terms of being at the front of the table, but now we have that seat at the table. And our roles has changed over the years. We got greater responsibilities ranging from overcoming economic volatility in the market, making sure we safeguard data, because data is becoming more and more important in what we do every single day. And so making sure we're in the forefront of that. And then safeguarding and supporting our ESG goals across the board. It's really key that we kind of stay in front of that. And so if you think about it, 95% of decision makers that we surveyed said there's room for procurement organizations to optimize what they do every single day. Not that we don't do it right, not that we don't do it good, but we have room to optimize and get better. How do we create a better customized solution for our partners? How do we streamline what we do around compliance? How do we bring faster and more creative solutions to what we do every single day? And making sure we got a good user experience for our client base and partners. It's going to be critical as we go forward with that. So let me take this time to kind of introduce you to our panelists. I think it'd be great to kind of meet some of the great people I have on stage with me. First, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Karoline Dygas, Chief Procurement Officer of Nordstrom. Now, all of us know about Nordstrom being a large retail giant out there with over 300 stores. And I'm real big on Nordstrom. I'm a huge Nordstrom fan.
Thank you.
But I love Nordstrom Rack.
It's perfect. That's our growth sector.
And the best part about Nordstrom Rack is what? Clear the rack. That is my Amazon Prime Day when I go to Nordstrom Rack.
Thank you.
Caroline, let me turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Kennedy. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Karoline Dygas with Nordstrom. I support sourcing and procurement for all non-merchandise spend at the company. I joined them about 4 years ago to really help transform and digitize the procurement function and really optimize it and set it ready for the future. Prior to Nordstrom, I've held various roles at other retailers like Starbucks and Walgreens and led teams in sourcing, procurement, and global supply chain, which is always a fun area. In my personal life, I have a great husband and 2 kids who are right now teenagers in high school. So if you have any advice for me, please share it. I can do global supply chain. I cannot do teenagers. So any and all advice is welcome. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to share some insights with you today.
Just remember, those teenagers, they do get old. They never leave home. They stay on your payroll forever.
I'm going to be employed forever, I guess. Can't retire.
Hey, up next, let me welcome Steve Simko from Genpact, the Global Procurement Service Line leader. Genpact is a leader on commercial service, technology. They really help a lot of companies streamline a process, rule out redundancies across the board. So let me turn it over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Kennedy. It's great to be here. I've been at Genpact for about 6 years. I lead our procurement service line globally. Prior to that, I've spent 20 years in the procurement space, over 20 years in the procurement space. And I've got a 12-year-old daughter who thinks it's hilarious that I have makeup on right now. So that's the big takeaway from me. But in my discussion too, I'll be presenting kind of 2 perspectives. One is as Genpact, our internal procurement, and what we do. The other is what we see across our client base as well. So I'll try to give perspectives from both sides.
Thanks. Glad to have you, buddy. Hey, next we have Jeff Wright here. Jeff is the Vice President and Global Head of Procurement for the Nasdaq. And all of us know the Nasdaq is truly a large financial institution. Jeff is not going to give you any tips on investing, so do not catch him later on and say, well, how's my stock doing?
If I do the opposite.
Yeah, you do the opposite. Run away from it. And notice, we were together yesterday, and Jeff must be a walking advertisement for everyone. Yesterday he had on United Airlines socks.
Hey,
Now today he got on Cooper socks. So I wonder, where the hell are the Amazon socks, man? I gotta get this going over here. Jeff, let's turn it over to you.
Thanks. I'll take them if you haven't. So I've been at Nasdaq for about 8 years, tasked very similarly to Karoline to mature that program across all facets of it. We've grown really fast. In the time I've been there, we've grown about 3 times where we started. Most people know Nasdaq as the market. You might like it depending on the day. Maybe you don't. But that's only about 9% of our revenue. We have about 90% of that revenue coming from other technology and SaaS products that folks typically aren't aware of. Right. I have $2 on a wife. I can't negotiate with any of them, so I will take tips on any of those too.
Yeah, pass the tips to all of us, because I don't think any of us do that. I don't think any of you do good to negotiations. Hey, now that we've welcomed the panelists, hey, let's dive into the main part of the discussion. Hey, the current landscape that we're faced into is riddled with challenges and things taking place around the economy, around the world. Procurement is very used to pivoting when things change. We're known to be agile and pretty flexible, but things are happening much faster, much frequent, and just like it's never ending. And Karoline, I'm gonna toss it over to you and say, hey, what are some of the things that your organization is doing to respond to some of this disruption that's taking place in the market?
Yeah. So obviously many of us in this room are supply chain or sourcing or procurement professionals. So we're not strangers to disruption, right? There's always something happening, some risk that's out there. There's climate impacts and weather events, there's natural disaster, there's conflicts, there's scarcity of supply in certain commodities. So we're used to it, right? And Esther yesterday mentioned that what's really changed, though, is the stacking of those disruptions or the velocity and the frequency of those disruptions. Like, we don't get a break. We used to get a break, no more. Now things just happen. And things happen that we don't even have plans for. Usually we're pretty good about being risk averse and having contingency plans and having risk matrix and having some sort of contingencies that help us mitigate it. But if anybody out there actually knows of anybody that was ready for a global shutdown by COVID, I will buy you a beer, because I think that one took us all by surprise and nobody was truly ready for the impact of it. So what do you do, right? How do you prepare for the things that are around the corner that you have no idea what they are? And I'm a big believer in preparation is not creating a spreadsheet of what if scenarios. It's truly making yourself and your teams being uncomfortable with the uncomfortable things that are going to happen. It's all about our mindset and our ability to just absorb what's happening and react and act in a way that doesn't freeze us all up, right? So the big component of that I'm a huge believer in is building really strong partnerships and relationships with your critical supplier partners. And being truly honest and vulnerable about where your risks are within your own supply chain and where are the areas that you do need to rely on somebody else to help fill in the gaps. We cannot do anything alone, right? No matter how good our companies are, we need supplier partners. We need somebody else to step in and help when we need it. And I think it actually did materialize around COVID, where companies did come together and really helped each other out, because we all realized that that's the only way to overcome obstacles is to partner and collaborate.
Oh, that's great. Jeff, what about you? What are you guys seeing on the Nasdaq, and how are you guys trying to manage disruption?
Yeah, and to pair on what you said, I think the relationship component is so important. Like if you think of any relationship you have in your life, if it doesn't have any trust or any faith to it, it's not going to work. And I won't touch on that further because I agree with everything you said there. But at Nasdaq, what we do tactically, we just want to know as much as we can about our suppliers systematically. Yeah. So as much information as we can pair and understand how that information changes on a daily basis, we can counteract a lot of the risks that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. We do that so we make sure the sky doesn't fall in, I would say ways that most of this crowd's aware of, checking daily to make sure our regulatory requirements are met. We're monitoring OFAC. We're looking at our third parties, our fourth parties, and capturing any of the changes that occur to those on a daily basis. Our contingency planning is really important for our critical suppliers. That's where we focused the first half of my sort of life here at Nasdaq. The second half was then looking at more strategic elements of the contracting and partnership process, and seeing where we can get more creative with sustainably looking at the terms that can help prevent spin leakage when renewals come forward, and looking at operationalizing the administration there. Mm-hmm. So first is making sure the sky doesn't fall, and then the second was how can you really get strategic with those partnerships you're developing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I always like to tell my team, this is not the time to be the victim. Mm-hmm. This is when you want to go on offense. You don't have time to sit back and wait for things. You got to get in front of it. So I think great responses. Hey, Stephen, toss this over you. Against the backdrop of disruption, I mean, there's a lot of things we got to continue to keep in focus in front of us. And if you layer in a whole lot of things with ESG and the complexity that brings, what do you think about how do you balance between making a decision of price versus ESG? How do you guys think about that?
At Genpact, when we think about ESG, we've got a long history with ESG, and actually more started with the social side of it, right? So we've got 115,000 employees, many in emerging markets, right? So we started there, and through our corporate social responsibility programs, like in 2022, we affected over 17 million people's lives. So we started with the S in ESG. We then migrated more to the E part of that, looking at scope 1 and 2 emissions, right? Emissions, and affecting that. And through that, over the last 5 years, we've driven that number down by about 36%, right? So those are things in our business that we tend to have more control over, right? Now we're shifting our focus to scope 3 and the supply base. And this, and we see this across our clients as well. I think looking at scope 3, it's important to look across your supply base, look at that, and then don't get overly, I don't think anybody solved the scope 3 measurement problem across the board yet, but use it as a way to focus your efforts, right? So you look across your, the categories where you're spending your money. Use that, then focus in on those key suppliers, those key categories where you can have the biggest impact. So we're in the middle of that right now, where we're looking at our top 50 suppliers, working our way systematically through that, saying, how can we have the biggest impact? In terms of the trade-offs, I think, say right now, for many companies, we're still at a spot where there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, right? That you can do this sort of both, have both your cake and eat it too. Many companies, I think, where they've set their emissions targets just out far enough, I think we're getting to that point right now where more and more companies we talk to are saying, yeah, we're getting into those decisions, and we've got to escalate the visibility of that.
I think we all are learning as we go through this whole process.
Yeah.
It's something that never been on the forefront, but now it has. Hey, Jeff, what about you guys? What are you guys doing in this area?
Yeah, it's a hot topic at Nasdaq. If you've seen the news at all, we're all over ESG, and I think where we're focusing is diversity and sustainability. And it took us 2 years to just have the data. You're going to continuously hear me say data, but to have the data readily available and sustainably available, so that you can even understand what your diversity levels are. And then once you get to a point where you're comfortable there, you can start actioning those strategies. Ultimately, we have 2 goals. We want to increase our engagement with historically disadvantaged third parties, and we want to make sure that we're pushing our suppliers to reduce their emissions and ultimately commit to a net carbon neutral footprint. And I think that's typically the case for most companies, is to look at it in those 2 areas. From a diversity perspective, we look at the things that we're in control of. So we're in control of our tailspin, and we utilize Amazon Business for that, and we've been configuring that in the right ways to prioritize diversity for a couple years now. We're in charge of the contingent labor program as well, so we prioritize diverse agencies and diverse hiring practices. And then I think what's most important outside of the systematic elements is partnering. This goes with the internal partnerships as well, making sure that not only C-suite, but your head of technology, because we buy a lot of tech, that they're aware of what we're trying to do, and we offer them resources so that they can proactively bring in diverse third parties. So we've developed a supplier library of diverse suppliers. We've also put a public portal, a public-facing web portal for diverse third parties to introduce themselves to Nasdaq. And so we've seen a lot of traction in those areas because of it.
Yeah, a couple things you said on there. One is about the supplier, getting the supplier engaged. Another about the business. How do you try to make sure you get the suppliers engaged to follow the goals that you're driving for? How do you get that partnership?
Yeah. For us, I think it pairs very nicely to what Karoline said. The more healthy those relationships are with your suppliers, they're gonna be motivated and willing to respond to your questionnaires. I think you also don't want to overwhelm them with outreach. It's one of those things where if you ask too much, you're not going to get accurate responses back or no responses back. And so you really want to target and put a lot of strategy into the questions that you're posing to your suppliers.
Yeah. I mean, this is an ongoing process. This is truly a journey that we're all going to take. It's not a true destination. There's going to be many points we're going to stop as we take this journey, but recognize this truly is a journey. And as you make progress around the line, bring your business along with you, bring your business partners, and truly your suppliers have to be part of the solution as you go forward on that. Thanks a lot on that. Hey, technology, always play a key role in the things that we do to have the right ability to meet our goals and overcome some unexpected hurdles. And so, Karoline, I'd like to toss this over to you. Hey, when you think about your organization and where they are on the technology front, talk about what you guys doing to kind of bring technology to bear in your organization, how it's helping.
That's great. I love what I do because I have the opportunity to digitize and optimize processes, build some new ones, and really implement amazing technologies that really encourage a workforce that is productive and enjoys coming to work because they're not stuck doing transactional technical work. It is so fun. And right now, there's so many tools out there that really are there to support you with pretty much any component of the procurement lifecycle or supply chain lifecycle. That sometimes it's actually daunting to where do I start? So I get a lot of questions. Karoline, where does one start? And my answer for that is, how adventurous are you willing to be? Because it's for me, I'm like a kid in a candy shop, right? But not everybody is that open to trying new things or to like kind of pushing the envelope a little bit. But the good thing is there's so many tools out there that have been proven, that have really amazing support, that really do help you with components of the work that you're trying to accomplish. And then there's tools out there that are brand new, that are, AI. Everybody talks about AI. AI is special because it is new and it's kind of scary for folks. So for example, one thing that I'm doing with my team right now is evaluating, can we leverage AI to negotiate contracts? I don't know about you, but I hate contracts. Contracts are like the devil for me because you spend months negotiating a contract, a piece of paper that looks beautiful, legal kisses it because it's perfect, and then it sits in a drawer, nobody looks at it. So how can we actually make it a little bit less complicated? Maybe leverage AI. So again, there's tools out there that do components of it. I haven't found one yet, unless again, somebody has some ideas of who does it well, but that's okay if it's not perfect yet, because I'm willing to be the guinea pig. I'm willing to lean in and offer ideas and suggestions to help me mold this new tool to something that I know is going to deliver value. But again, not everybody's adventurous enough. And one thing that was mentioned by Stephanie this morning with Tealbook, and I think Stephanie, you're right there. I see you. I see your shoes.
I'll take some Tealbook socks too.
Yeah, right. Data is truly the foundation. No matter what tool you put in, what technology you innovate with, if you do not have good data governance, again, what you put in is what you get out. So a starting point always is data, cleanliness, governance, and that's actually the hardest part because we humans are not very good about always following the process fully, but it is possible, right? That's a big learning for all of us that are going through technology, innovation, and change, is to teach everybody that's touching that tool about the importance of data and about the importance of just embracing kind of the unknown and willingness to innovate and continue to innovate, because digitization is never over. The tool you implement is never done. You have to continue to improve upon it.
Yeah, I agree. When I think about technology, I always say the world of technology is moving twice as fast as everyone else. Yep. The moment you sit still, something new is already being created. We sit here right now, iPhone 20 probably out there right now. I think the speed really takes a lot of character into what's going on, and that fear factor is real. A lot of people are really afraid to take on innovation head on, but for us to make the great step in procurement, we're going to have to embrace it much more than we ever done before in the past. Absolutely. On it. Steve, what about you? What do you guys do?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I love the term that we've been talking about over the past couple of days is eating your own dog food. So we try to do that. The only problem is some people in our company don't like the taste of dog food. So that's sort of holds us back a little bit as we try to use our own recommendations. But we're seeing, in the now, we're seeing probably 4 areas that we're seeing a lot of uptake in the technology. One is unified buying experience. So right on the front end, how do you make it easy as possible for somebody to deal with the procurement organization? Number 2 is contract lifecycle management. So you're talking about the pain of contracts and authoring. Across our clients, we're probably seeing more people having systems than ever, getting adoptions and getting your own contracts into those systems and actually getting the most out of those systems is a journey, right, that you need to be on. Tail spend is another item to address that. More and more companies want to address that. It does require technology to do. I mean, Amazon Business is extremely well suited for that. And then the 4th is analytics and the data that underpins everything. And that just, to me, I think is just going to be on our radar for the foreseeable future. So that's kind of in the now. Going forward, I think, talked about a lot over the last couple of days too, is generative AI. And interestingly, about 2 weeks ago, I hosted a roundtable of CPOs, and we brought up the topic of generative AI. And my takeaway from that is this, that if you're sitting on the technology side of the business and you're talking generative AI and you're talking to the procurement executive, what they hear is AI, right? In some ways, there's no differentiation in terms of what that can do. But when I look at generative AI and think about what that can do. And fundamentally what procurement job is, you're creating documents, whether it's contracts, RFPs, those kinds of things, or analyzing documents, again, contracts or proposals. You look at what tools like ChatGPT can do, and it's so well suited for that. So I think if there's one area I'm extremely bullish on going forward in technology, it's that.
That's great. See, how are you educating your team that, hey, technology innovation is the right way to go? Instead of being passive and say, I'm gonna wait to see what happens versus, hey, I want to be on the forefront. How are you?
Yeah, so I mean, at Genpact, we have a fantastic training program there, and we call it Genome, and so it's an online self-paced platform that we combine with hands-on training as well. So we were pretty quick to the mark on this, is we put a full generative AI training program in there. So when we look at our procurement teams that are involved with that, there's certain modules of that right, we say are included in that. But even in our core procurement training, there's a whole separate track that you can follow that's basically analytics and digital as well. So that's one of the ways we do it. And then the other part is just two things. I think one is involving people in technology related decisions. And then in particular areas, we've selected people to say, we'd like you to be an expert in this area and stay abreast of it. So something like generative AI is going to change so fast. You can't, as a leader, you just can't sort of push that information down. You have to have somebody watching that and keeping their pulse on it. So we've identified leads in those areas to keep abreast of the market.
Oh, that's great. I think, again, this is something we should all run towards versus run away from. It's going to enhance your organization, enhance your business, and really streamline what we do, not only just for today, but lead into tomorrow. So don't run from this one.
I think he laid out the themes nicely too. So it makes it much less overwhelming, right? So like at Nasdaq, we're really focused on data and analytics. That's sort of the heart and soul of what we do. And when you get that right, then you can start focusing on some of those other areas. And we're really focused on CLM. So when you think, because you have a couple CPOs, 3 on stage here, that seem to hate contracts. It's kind of interesting to think about. But you can remove yourself from that and operationalize so much of that contract. There's still going to be intervention. But again, if you can limit, like step back and think about what's important to your organization, it really limits how overwhelming the tech can be.
Yeah, and talk, Jeff, real quick on data integrity. How do you make sure that you're protecting that data and making sure that it's not out there in the world and people can access it? How do you guys maintain that? We talk about technology.
Yeah, there's so I'm not a technologist, but I will say that contractually there's obviously DPA terms that we can put in place to make sure that as our information is shared with critical suppliers, that they're abiding by those terms and conditions. We bring in like our technology partners and information security to make sure that's safe. But then the data that I selfishly want to enrich, that's transactional data. That's stuff that touches our ERP. And we're really, really careful. We even have like a whole steering committee about who can touch our ERP and transactional data so that it's not just out there in the open with third parties that have all that. So we're really careful about that.
That's awesome. I think that's great work there. Hey, you think about, we move forward and think about agility in the business, and how do we make sure we stay flexible along the way and purchasing process are robust enough, but we still need guardrails. We need to make sure we don't have rogueness within the system. So think about this, Jeff. Hey, what are some of the processes and safeguards you guys are putting in place to make sure you stay compliant and not having a lot of rogueness within your operation?
Yeah, this was an interesting question when I saw it posed earlier. I think the boring answer is we've configured all of our platforms, our enterprise platforms and tools. We've configured our policy within those. They all sort of cater to your policies. But I would say what's more interesting, because we've been growing so fast, we want to make sure we're not your stereotypical, burdensome procurement team and delaying development. We went through this massive streamlining exercise all the way up to our CEO and our board to remove what is largely useless steps. In certain instances, if you do too much of something, it's not going to accomplish what it was set out to do. The perfect example of that is approvals. I think we could all probably sympathize. We went through every process, and not only within the procurement world, even like I led this area within our HR department, our hiring practices, our global tech organization, to remove what is essentially useless approval steps. But again, we call this trust but verify. So what we've started to do on the back end is we've been doing this for a couple of years, is run transaction testing and anomaly testing through RPA. And as we find anomalies, we have a whole playbook and SOPs to investigate those things. So what we've done is actually on a quarterly basis look at our expense base from a category perspective have things inflated. Like a perfect example is travel. Everybody hates submitting an expense report. Everybody hates all the approvals associated to it. We made that process so simplistic. And there was a worry that the teeny expense base would go up. What we've seen is two things. The expense base has actually gone down as you put a little bit more trust in your workforce, even though you're still verifying it on the back end. But then our engagement scores have skyrocketed. So there's a couple really positive components to actually looking at streamlining that and then protecting it on the back end.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, and for all of you, you get a chance to meet these panelists, before the session's over. A lot of great things are happening in these companies, so don't limit yourself to just connecting here. A lot of great stuff that we all can gain from each other and grow and be better at what we do. So great stuff there. And I like the whole fact of just kind of, putting the right process in place and trusting and then verifying.
Exactly.
And I think we all like workflows, don't we? Who all like workflows? Or is it get rid of them all? I think we got enough time for another question here. Pulling all of the themes and thoughts together from what we experienced throughout the session here, what does smart buying means to each of you? I really like to get your thoughts and really kind of instill some advice onto the team here. So I'll start with you, Karoline. What does smart buying mean to you?
So smart business buying is leveraging data and technology and innovation in order to make the buying experience easy. Sometimes with processes and policies, we make it way too hard and nobody wants to do it. So how do you make it easy? How do you make it so simple that anybody in your company can buy the good and the service they need, while at the same time supporting business objective, whether it's cost savings or ESG or value delivery or growth? Because it's not either or, it's everything collectively has to work together. And that's really what smart business buying is. At the same time, leveraging those partnerships and those relationships with your suppliers to enable you to do smart business buying, which is, I think, another example as to why we're all here, because Amazon Business is doing that for us. They are enabling us to make better business decisions in how we purchase certain goods. And now I heard that you guys are getting into services too, which is exciting for me. But it's all that. It's all of the things that we discussed today on the stage coming together in an effective way to help us support our overall objectives.
Steve, what does smart business buying mean to you?
Well, first of all, let me say there's no magic to it. Okay, there we go. I was looking for a good collective groan. Thank you. But no, when I think about that, the word I think about is deliberate. And this is going to be more important, I think, as we move forward and there's more and more technology as part of the process. So I'll give an example. If you think about self-driving cars, we've been talking about how quickly will they be commonplace, right? And a lot of the problem to solve there is technical, but there's also a big problem to solve that says, how do you program decisions into the car, right? Let's say it hits an edge case and there's going to be an accident and you have to make a decision between hitting a pedestrian, someone in another car, injuring the driver, right? You're actually at a position now where the car can react quickly enough and you actually have to think about that ahead of time and make some decision in the technology. Now, procurement isn't life or death like that, but you're going to have the same things happening, that as you get more workflows or more AI built into procurement, it's going to be the job of procurement leaders to say, I want to make buying easy. Which parts of the buying do I maybe care less about? Or if I want to guide users in the right direction, what's the right way to do that, right? How do I care about preferred suppliers? Do I want to have redundancy of supply? So to me, I think technology is going to be a forcing function in that. And the procurement leaders will need to be smart and embed that smarts into the technology.
Yeah. And how far up into the process you think procurement leaders should be involved in the process? You talk about that.
Before the process starts.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. I think setting up the strategy, the philosophy, all of that, I think it's procurement's job, partnering with finance to strike that balance between control and user experience and that. And every company culture is different, so there's no one answer to that either. But I think as a procurement leader, I think it's looking at that, being a business leader and saying what's the right answer for the business.
Yeah, I try to treat it like it's that lane assist on your car. You get out of the lane, it just throw you back over.
Yeah,
how we got to kind of keep
exactly. I love it.
I think that works pretty good.
I love it.
Jeff, what about you, Nasdaq? What do you guys?
Yeah, I think those answers really resonate with me. Talk about technology good data analytics, like that stuff's obviously important. But to maybe focus on a theme is, and the theme that I've recognized a lot over the past couple of days is that we now have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And we have that at Nasdaq as well, and I think that's really important. Smart business buying on $1 billion of annual expenses, which is Nasdaq's, not Amazon. That it's never going to be smart if it's decentralized and happening within the business. It's just not. And they could be the smartest, most competent negotiators of all time, but they're still lacking holistic view of the firm. And so as we continue to grow that seat at the table, and as most of you, I'm assuming, are working towards doing as well or already have, that's what creates smart business buying to me, because then you have a team that can help educate and guide everyone throughout the firm in terms of how to properly buy, and you can arm them with the right data and technology to do it. So I think the more that the procurement organization has that seat at the C-suite table, it creates that smart buying process and helps facilitate it.
That's awesome. I'm gonna throw one more question at you guys. It's a simple one.
Uh-oh.
What keeps you up at night? When you think about what's happening in our current environment, the geopolitical issues, what's that one thing that
Besides my teenage kids, you know, I think sometimes we get in our own way when we're trying to innovate, right? We get tripped up by old tapes or old ways of doing things. And what keeps me up at night is not being able to tell the story of why this innovation is important and why we have to springboard and why we have to leap kind of sometimes into the unknown. Because storytelling is sometimes hard. It's hard for me personally. So it's conveying that importance of not being stagnant and not just doing things the way you used to do it. Because literally, like, you're only as good as you are today. And tomorrow, you better do something different to keep propelling forward. So that's the one thing, because obviously everything else is so super unknown that if I would worry about everything that could potentially be happening, I would probably go gray sooner. So, but it's just all that.
Yeah, great. Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a lot about the macro environment that we're working in. So obviously there's so many different dimensions, and I think you do everything you can to build resilience, build the flexibility to adapt to that. But you still don't know what was coming around the corner. And I think one of the things that's tricky is, as a procurement leader, we're always talking about price and cost. That's always sort of at the baseline of what we do, but there's so much other value to get out of supplier relationships or reducing risk. You think about all the things that a CPO affects. And I think telling the stories, right, about that, convincing the business of the full value there, I think is kind of a journey that you're on. And then you hit hiccups in the economy like this, I think, and it sort of pushes you back to cost in some ways again. So I think keeping that narrative going in terms of the true value that procurement can add in the background of the macroeconomic situation.
Awesome. Jeff, what about you?
I sleep great.
I know you sleep well. It's the melatonin.
Yeah, it's gotta be. So, Karoline, the concept of like thinking about what's next, like I think you've already touched on that. That's clearly really important because we're not perfect and no one is. And so what can you really focus on next? But an easy answer could be supplier risk or cyber vulnerabilities, because that industry is just evolving as the days pass. But I would say to maybe something that actually truly does make me think about things a little more in the evening and at night or whatever is your team. You're only as good as your team. And our team continues to grow, monitoring their motivation, their engagement, their capacity, is really important to me, because without that team, you can't really do any of the stuff we're talking about. So I would say my team's probably is what I think about most.
Yeah, I think we should never lose sight on our team. I mean, that's the true essence of what we do and how we make things happen. And I think for me, it's all around complacency. Yeah. Not being complacent in the world that we play in. You got to be aggressive. You got to be in the front. We always say around the company, have a bias for action. I think that's going to be pretty critical for us. Hey, thanks again, Karoline, Steve, Jeff. Thanks a lot for this insights you share with us. It's great. We covered a wide range of trends and challenges and opportunities that's really impacting procurement leaders around the world today, and how that really can impact us as we go forward into the future. And so as you kind of reflect on the conversation we had today and throughout the week, I'd like to encourage you to really think about what does smart business buying mean to you and to your organization, and then what steps that you can take to move your organization forward. The environment's going to always change. You know, whether or not it's happening in front of you or further miles and miles away from you, it's always going to continue to change. So sitting back and playing the victim and waiting for the solution, many times that we got to create that next solution. And so being a forefront leader, engaging, networking with those in the environment, you don't have to recreate things. There's a lot of things that's already available to us in terms of technology and just being and talking to one another in this room today. So I really appreciate you being here. What a great session. Amazon Business Reshape. And thanks a lot and have a great one and get home safe. Appreciate it. Thank you.